So Rest Stop is a horror novella about a young, aimless musician who is going to be by the bedside of his dying grandmother. And he really doesn't want to go, so he's been really putting this off. It's the middle of the night. It's like 2, 3 in the morning, and he's got hours to go on this awful drive. And he decides to stop at a gas station, and he walks into the gas station. He's a little unnerved by the fact that it is totally empty. He goes to the bathroom, he does his business, and then that's when he realizes that someone has taken that moment to lock him inside the bathroom, and now he can't get out. And the person who is responsible for doing that then proceeds to torment him in ways that are increasingly more and more horrific and hard to survive. And the whole time he just wants to know why.
Shit, I had a great opening question and I totally forgot it.
Keep it in. Keep it in.
They were keeping this in. This is going to be the perfect entree into the conversation.
We'll just have a nice 2-minute long silence.
Just me.
People love dead air.
What was? And I'm like, you can hear me flipping papers and stuff. So you're one of the few people I've had as a repeat visit on my podcast, because I'm only 50. This will be my 53rd episode. And you came on about in the late 20s. So welcome back. It's good to talk again.
Hello. It's good to see you. What have you learned?
What's
going to be different?
Well,
let's talk about your journey.
That's honestly kind of the learn was that when we talked about nestlings, we dove so deep into very kind of serious topics and stuff.
That was a heavy conversation.
It really was. And
I like it.
Then I was like, well, that's how I talked to Nat. So now I guess this is the test. Can we talk in different levels, and can we just, be lighthearted, or maybe just talk about incredible violence? I don't know. So maybe this will be a bit of a different conversation than last time.
This very frothy tale of generational trauma.
Oh my God. Seriously. So we'll talk about Rest Stop, but just for anybody who's listening, I also threatened Nat with talking about the chapbooks that were released through Shortwave, and also I'm going to want to learn more about this When the Wolf Comes Home book that's coming out next year. So bear with us. So Rest Stop is coming out October 15th. And that's through Shortwave. And did we gush about Shortwave the last time we talked? Was that part of the conversation? I don't recall.
I don't think so. And even if we did, it always bears reiteration.
Yeah, absolutely.
Shortwave's awesome.
And so I talked to Chloe Spencer, who had Mewing. I talked to Clay recently with Stay on the Line. I talked to Joshua Milliken with his book Teleportasm. I'm getting a lot of the Shortwave folks, but every time Shortwave comes up, without fail, the experience is a really good experience. And so I'm wondering, are you going to be the one who breaks that that string of experiences, or
I mean, I could, but I would be lying. I would be lying through my teeth and just trying to get attention. I've loved working with Shortwave. Alan is just a delight. Even my agent has told me, I love working with Alan. He's so lovely. Yeah, it's a phenomenal press. They do incredible work. As you've just listed, they have a great bench of writers. And also Alan is just he's a design genius. So the books look gorgeous. Mm-hmm. They feel gorgeous. It's very John Hammond. He spared no expense, but I hope he doesn't wind up paying the price for his hubris with an island full of books coming to get him.
That would be, well, I mean, that no one would see that coming. So there might be some merit to that. But yeah, he really, and in a short period of time, because I don't think that Shortwave has been 2 years that they've been around or something. And
It has been pretty brief, hasn't it?
Yeah, he's really kind of captured a portion of. I feel like right now is a real good opportunity for indies to do something that traditionals aren't doing, and in that way, not feeling like they're in competition with something, but they're
Yeah.
like their own separate thing. And I feel like Alan's doing a great job of that with Shortwave.
Yeah, agreed. Agreed. He's a great home for things that might, fall through the cracks of a traditional publisher that are
Yeah.
a little artsier, a little weirder.
Yeah, but then also stuff that I don't know if this is your experience, but stuff that like the authors might have just had and not had a place to place it. And
Yeah.
so now, even if it's not the case, and like maybe you're writing after knowing there's a market for it, knowing that there's places that, I mean, Shortwave, it's called Shortwave for a reason. They do more short form stuff. It's nice to know that there's a place that's looking for that thing that's different than what, like Simon and Schuster or whatever is looking for.
Yeah. There's a nimbleness too that is really delightful. Like I absolutely love being a Nightfire author. It's like the place I would want my novels to be, even if I wasn't with them. I'm immensely excited and honored to be part of that team. But like the Big Five machine moves slowly. Like I finished When the Wolf Comes Home, which is my next book through Nightfire that comes out in April of 2025 in the fucking future. I finished that months and months and months ago. It takes like a year from final draft to see publication. And one of the reasons I first approached Alan was because I had this novella and I had this year on the calendar where I wasn't going to have a release coming out. And for whatever reason, I was like, oh my God, I got to have something come out in 2024. And because of that nimbleness, because of that, that strategic smallness, he was able to accommodate my ridiculousness, and we managed to get this book out in a month, less than a month, 29 days.
That's actually, I did not know that, but that's fantastic. That's awesome. And then he also released, for the people who are watching the video,
I see them.
The two chapbooks. There's Generation and I forgot the name of the other one. It's in front of me. The Art of What You Want, which I read like an hour ago. And so
you're still talking to me, huh?
Yeah, I read Generation first, and then I read The Art of What You Want.
That's how we like it. We like that 1-2 punch.
So my reading has been pretty bleak, and we'll get into that in a second. But I can't tell you how excited I was to actually have chapbooks, like professionally produced chapbooks, in my hand.
Yeah,
because I was a zine guy for a minute back in the day, and I had that, that big long stapler, and I was like putting stuff together by hand, and so it kind of took me back to that kind of like small, do this in the spare bedroom of your apartment kind of feel, but with something of a quality that's super professional. So it was a nice that, and Clay's got a few. Clay, for anybody listening, Clay McLeod Chapman has a few chapbooks on Shortwave as well, and I'm just fingers crossed that continues, because those are really cool ways to get little short stories like actually physically in your hand.
Yeah, agreed. Alan just announced yesterday or the day before or a few days before, whenever you're listening to this, that there's a yearly subscription package for Shortwave, and it's been mentioned that there'll be at least 2 more little ones from me coming out next year. So if you like them, stay tuned.
That's awesome. That's fantastic. So all the love to Shortwave, as always. People are going to start thinking I'm like secretly a Shortwave podcast, but I was talking to Becky Spratford and Emily Hughes when we were doing my first horror preview episode thing, and I was saying I could get so many more episodes down if I was reading shorter stuff, because I'm not like the fastest reader, so I can't read a book a week, but
yeah,
I could knock out 140 pages pretty quick. So Alan's did me a favor he didn't know he was doing me, I think, by doing this. But all right, so I want to talk about the back-to-back reading I did. Because
let's do it. Unburden yourself.
I read Rest Stop immediately following Sophia Ashram's coup de grace. And I don't know if you've read that or not.
I have. That's a bleak double bill.
Bleak existential situation followed by, I mean, not a sunny story. That's pretty nerve-wracking. So I had a crazy week, I think, getting all this reading done.
Yeah, it sounds it. Although I will say that seems like the right order to do it in for your mental health, because coup de grace is so just dizzyingly existential.
Yeah,
that it feels like Rest Stop's like a little more hopeful, a little more like feet on the ground.
Right. Yeah, that
figure out what to do with your life now.
Yeah, yours was kind of the sunrise, I think,
right.
of the situation,
which says a lot. I fucking love coup de grace. I think it's great.
I hope that it is. I hope it receives the attention and praise that it deserves, because it is just a fierce debut. For Sophia. So, but then jumping into Rest Stop, I was like, because it starts out kind of, it reading about it, it felt like there was an interesting premise of, a guy stops at a rest stop and like crazy shit happens. And it starts out, the dude's driving down the road, Abe, the main character's driving down the road, and there's just like things about his life going on as he's traveling from point A to point B. So he's got things that's going on with his band, and he's got, his grandmother who's ill and everything. And I'm thinking, okay, this is pretty light. This might not be too crazy. This might be a nice like palate cleanser from what I just went through. And within, I want to say 15% of the book, the wheels just fall off, and it's just kind of lunacy. So, but I want to attack what you said first, which was it being a story about generational trauma. So, do you want to talk about kind of what inspired you to write this story, or what kind of like the kernel of the idea was?
Yeah, sure. It's interesting because it's superficially a very simple story. Like, guy goes to gas station in the middle of the night, goes to the bathroom, a stranger locks him into the bathroom and then starts tormenting him. And I like that, honestly, is where it first kind of came from. It was just like I wanted to write like a locked room sort of, I wouldn't consider myself an extreme horror writer by any stretch, but I wanted to write like my approximation of an extreme horror story sort of vibe, and just have it be this grungy, gnarly little, set piece. This might be obvious, it might not. It was even originally conceptualized as a screenplay, because I was like, oh, this would be an easy movie to film. It's one actor and some flashbacks. But I don't know. There was, you have to bear with me too, because you're the second person I've spoken to about this book. So I'm still figuring out how to talk about it. But
Great.
I had really wanted to get to know this guy who was trapped in the bathroom. I knew it was going to be a character piece.
Mm-hmm.
And, originally, when I'd first started like breaking the story, I thought he was going to be Korean. I was really interested in Korean history, still am, and I thought it would be like an interesting like way to get into someone dealing with the previous generations of Korean history, and what it would be like to be like someone contemporary right now, thinking of their grandparents, because I am not Korean, but I'm third generation American. I always forget how to do the math on that. My grandmother emigrated from Poland. So I'm the grandson of an immigrant. And I think about that stuff a lot. And I think about, the sort of shit that my grandmother put on my mom, the sort of shit that then trickled down to me and my brother's generation. And I've always just been fascinated about the tug of war between assimilating and not assimilating, and the guilt and the pride, and just this weird jumble of inheritance that you get as the grandkid of immigrants. So I wanted to do that with this Korean American guy, so I could explore Korean history and stuff like that. Like, I just thought that would be a great way to unpack some things and explore some things. But again, as it was mentioned earlier, the turnaround time for this story was going to be really quick, and there was no way I was going to try and write anything about a culture that is not mine, or a background that is not mine, without doing extensive research and beta reads and stuff like that. Like, I wouldn't want to fuck that up. So I was like, well, I guess I could just do it about my background.
Yeah.
And it was just one of those weird things. Like, for some reason, I was hesitant to do that from the jump. I don't know why. There was part of me that thought it was just kind of uninteresting. There was part of me that thought, Nestlings is also about like kind of secular Jewishness and squaring the circle of being a descendant of immigrants and stuff like that. So I felt like it was ground maybe I'd already stepped on, if not, fully tilled. But then once I started digging into it, I was like, oh, fuck, this is exactly what I wanted to write. This is exactly what I needed to write. I had a grandmother who was very similar to the grandmother in the novella.
Mm-hmm.
And, some of the complications therefrom. And so it became, looking back on it now, when I look at like this, intellectual sort of exercise I was thinking of to explore a culture that wasn't mine, that seems ridiculous in retrospect, of like, oh my, I had this story to kind of explore already. I didn't need to like hide behind some sort of like interest or anything like that I wanted to explore something, that distance, not hiding behind it, but putting that distance between myself and the subject matter. So this became just a great way to unpack that sort of stuff. So it has a few echoes of Nestlings with those similar bits of baggage, but it's also its own thing, and it became a way to look at what it's like to feel like a disappointment to your ancestors, what it's like to not know if you're fulfilling your obligation as a citizen of a quote unquote new place compared to where your grandparents' generation fled. And it's explicitly set in 2016. I wanted it to be set in the summer of 2016, which I look at as kind of like a hinge point in contemporary American life, and just kind of explore the dialogue between a generation that in my particular case, for the Polish Americans, Ukrainian Americans, which is my background, they were fleeing obviously a very horrific situation, and a time period in which certain forces seem to be gaining unstoppable dominance. And I wanted to then kind of have it be a reflection point with a current day person looking at similar forces and trends and being like, what is similar? What is different? How would I handle those forces different than my grandparents would? And things like that. So it really does become a generational dialogue between Abe and his grandmother. I don't know if that answer made any sense, but that's what was like stewing around, and what had originally been a very simple, I want a guy trapped in a bathroom having to fight snakes and spiders and see what happens from there.
Nope. Perfect. That was perfect. And it teed up like 3 different things that I want to respond with.
So we're going to have another heavy conversation.
I know.
It's going to happen.
I know. So I'll just give as much as I can, and then we'll see where it goes. But you had said that you didn't know whether or not it would kind of feel like maybe it was originally written as a screenplay. Here's the thing that I thought about that. Early on, when he was locked in this bathroom, and then like a thing happened, and then a thing happened, I was like, this could easily be on a stage because it's a single room, it's an individual. Like this could be a stage performance so easily. And then I thought about your background and everything, and I was like, this totally makes sense. So I assumed that this was just like a comfortable thing for you, maybe not necessarily how you intended it to be, but like, you know, just like a format that felt right for you. And so I don't know if that's how it was, but yeah, I did pick up on that a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. I never thought of it as a play just because there's so much like interiority happening.
Sure.
And so many moments where one of the things I love about horror theater, and I don't know if anyone's tuning into this that isn't familiar with my bio, but my background before I became a novelist was as a horror playwright. And I've been writing horror plays for almost 20 years now. And it's a very specific medium, which probably goes without saying. But one of the things that makes it so specific, and one of the things that when you tell a good horror story on the stage that is that you can get in a way that you can't get in any other medium, is you can't force the audience eye anywhere. Like when you're sitting at a play, you are free to look wherever the hell you want. You can spotlight some things, but you know, it's never like true darkness usually. And more often than not, it's still a pretty hazy sort of border. And in general, you're looking at a lot of breadth in your audience eye. And so one of the fun things about horror on the stage is that things can just like creep into your awareness. A thing can be there and have been there for a while. And one of the things that makes horror cinema so uniquely great is that you can move the audience eye to wherever you want to move it. And it can be a close-up, it can be whatever. But they don't have the option of looking somewhere else. Like what you have is what's in front of you. And that was also like one of the things I wanted to experiment with in Rest Stop was just like, you know, you can't look at anything other than that vent. You can't look at anything other than that tiny crack in the door. But you're also correct in that, like, I love intimate, simple sort of scenarios that you kind of have to embrace when you're writing for the stage anyway. Because like sometimes the most like unshakably fucked up things can happen when you only have like a couple of ingredients. So yeah, there's definitely some playwright influence into this.
And that, you know, and obviously that's me being naive about the difference between like film and like a stage performance, as far as like the move in the eye and everything. So I definitely feel a lot better after you having said that, of like my understanding of the influence. Yeah, definitely. That's cool. In response to a couple of other things that you said, about more of like the generational stuff. When I was reading this, I was in parts kind of taken back to either the reading of or our conversation of Nestlings, where we specifically spoke about survival as a thing, you know, as a I was trying to think of a way to say it, because in Nestlings, at least in our conversation, we were talking about like the main character, and he meets someone, and they're talking about how, like, you know, over history we've survived this, and the whole question was like, why do we have to keep fucking surviving things? And so survival being like a strong point in that conversation, in that part of the book, and Abe in this book at different points throughout the story reflecting on his interactions like with his grandmother and stuff, but also like I feel that the extremity of some of the things that happen in the story push him into a mode where he's got to survive, and then as he's going through that, almost maybe drawing strength on some of the stuff from his family history and stuff as well.
Yeah.
I could be reading into that. But the other thing I noticed was, so you had mentioned that, or maybe you hadn't mentioned, in the beginning, Abe is talking to his brother. And, they got a grandmother who, she had a stroke. And so, like, she's medically kind of in a tenuous situation. But she's also a pain in the ass. And so they're, like, talking about how she's, like, you got to worry about your grandmother who, might not have much longer to live, but also acknowledging she's kind of a pain in the ass. And so all of this is to say, I liked the fact that even though we have sometimes trouble with or issues with or struggles with, our history with our family, we can still draw strength from that. And we can still, in moments of extreme, whatever it happens to be, like in this situation, obviously it's a little bit more like literal violence. But like, in troubling times in our lives, we can remember the things about our family that we can draw strength from. So I got a little bit of that out of kind of the whole story in general, but it kind of took me back to the conversation we were having in that one part of Nestlings as well. So that was long-winded, but maybe there's something for you to reply to there.
Oh, sure. And appreciated. Yeah, it's interesting. I think there's definitely an overlap on the Venn diagram of nestlings and rest stop. And part of that overlap is this idea of survival.
Yeah.
But there's also an element in rest stop that I haven't quite articulated yet in the context of talking about the book. And so I don't quite know how to do it, so bear with me.
Sure.
But it's also a book about cruelty and agency and about the cost of surviving. I think Nestlings is about the drive to survive, the hardwired feeling to like, I need to take care of my family. I need to propagate. I need to protect. I need to make sure that we survive. And Rest Stop is kind of about what happens when you survive. In Abe's grandmother's case, she has survived something horrific, and it has made her very cruel. It's made her mean. And through the course of the story, which Abe is trying to survive, he wrestles with that as a lineage too, that as an inheritance. Like, should I become mean? Should this make me something that I don't want to be? And I don't want to wade into too controversial or challenging areas to discuss, but like certainly as an American Jew watching the situation going on in Israel right now, and in Gaza, and especially in the West Bank as well, not especially, but also, I think those of us in a similar situation are also like confronting those sort of things. Like I don't think this story could have been written the way it is written, had it not taken place like right now in this year. Because there is constantly this feeling of like, this is not the way to survive. Like responding to atrocity with atrocity is not the way to do it. And that question is very active in this story, I think. How, again, speaking kind of specifically just as like from my perspective as a rather secular American Jew, coming from a legacy of persecution and stuff like that, that doesn't mean that then persecution is justified in response to things. And I wanted that to kind of be an active sort of dilemma, obviously a much smaller scale for Abe. But this feeling of like, I don't want this experience to change me, but also obviously this experience is going to change me. Speaking from his perspective. And so that becomes this additional character in this drama. I don't want to spoil anything. I'm going to try not to spoil anything. But the relationship between Abe and his grandmother runs kind of parallel to the relationship between Abe and his grandmother, and the idea of God, the idea of something cosmic, the idea of something that either has the power to stop this awfulness, or this awfulness is part of its awful plan. It's a very cosmic sort of dilemma towards the end. And that is also a key part of it, just like this relationship between like man and God, and the why of it, the why of this cruelty, the why of this dilemma in the first place, of like, why is hatred even a thing? Why is this animosity even a thing? Which makes it sound very heavy and intellectual, and I promise it's a lot more action packed than that. But these are the kind of things that were operating behind the scenes of working on it, and again, just trying to figure out where our place is in this larger conversation of the burden of past traumas and the active conflagration of contemporary traumas, and just trying to like fucking fight your way through that continuum to just like find a peaceable present. That's very much the dilemma at play, I think.
Well, and I won't spoil anything for anybody who hasn't read this, which is most people probably, but you saying what you did about the relationship between Abe and his grandmother kind of recontextualized a moment in the story, and I won't say when it took place, but like it had to do with not speaking in her presence. And so now that kind of recontextualizes that. But not to go too deep into this, but I've been having conversations.
That's what we're here for.
I know that's what this is. I've had conversations recently about parenting through different generations, and so I'm going to kind of walk it in reverse. But like, people who are parents today are so present in their children's lives, and they're so involved and active, and take that one generation back, latchkey, like my generation, we were very much left alone and left to our own devices by our parents. But you take that one generation back, and the people who were my parents' generation, their parents were, it's either them, great generation, or what is it, greatest generation, whatever. Like, that generation had gone through so much fucked up stuff that they were actively bad at parenting, I think. And so
they had other priorities.
Right. Because how can you fucking blame them in a way for not being like able to parent the way that people of current generations can, because generationally the experiences are different. And so like conversations I've had recently are all about like, like people were shitty parents back in the day, but they also went through a couple of wars and the Great Depression and like the fucking Dust Bowl and like whatever else, recessions and everything, and nuclear, everything, like the trauma that was visited upon like that generation or those earlier generations is going to have an effect. Yeah. And so while it's not the behavior you would hope in a maybe a parenting relationship, in hindsight, you have to at least acknowledge that there are factors that impact what we're able to do, what we're capable of doing. And so, yeah, that's been an interesting conversation that I've experienced, like even just the stark difference between how I was raised and how all of my friends are raising their children.
Right.
It's staggeringly different. And you couldn't even conceive of parenting the same way that our parents parented us. So
Right.
yeah, like generationally, there's a huge, but there's like those factors that you have to consider about why, I guess.
Yeah, I kind of went through that journey while I was writing this. Even like my grandmother, my actual grandmother, who's the only grandparent I ever knew, my mom's mom, as I've already kind of, I forget if I've alluded to this or if I explicitly said it already, but like she was a lot. She was a lot to handle. Some people have asked me if Nadine from Mary was based on anyone, and she was in part kind of based on my grandmother. Although Nadine was a lot more charming. My grandmother was rough. She was mean. She was really mean, especially to like me and my brother. And very unpleasant, very rude, and sometimes cruel. She was cruel to my mom. She was just an unpleasant person to be around. My experience of her. I know my cousins and my aunts, like, I think had their own relationship with her that was maybe not as negative as mine was. But that was the kind of relationship I had in my head going into writing this and exploring exactly the phenomenon that you're describing.
Yeah.
And even just by virtue of getting older, and the older you get, the more you start thinking about your ancestors and your immediate ancestors and what life must have been like for them. And I similarly had this kind of quiet revelation of like, God, I wish she was still around so I could just talk to her about what it must have been like to, she came to America in 1929, the fucking year of the crash, fleeing a pogrom in Ukraine/Poland, because it was kind of like right on the border where those countries have been shifting, and to just like land in New York. Her parents open up a knish shop on the Lower East Side. They're living in like a tenement building, and at the same time, so dealing with the Great Depression now in fucking New York, learning how to speak English. And so my grandmother and her parents and my grandmother's two siblings, I want to say, 2 or 3 siblings, came to New York. They came to the States. But she had first cousins and aunts and uncles who were still in Poland, who they were desperately trying to get visas to come here as well, and the U.S. kept denying them and not allowing them to come, and they died in camps. They died horrible deaths, and like just imagining what that must have been like to be desperately trying to bring your family to escape the thing that you just escaped, and to meet that resistance. And then I learned only like last year, I think, or it was even earlier this year, that my great-grandparent, my great-grandfather, her dad, my grandmother's dad, was in a fucking Siberian prisoner of war camp after World War I. And like, I think if the math checks out, I think my grandmother was conceived like right after he got home from a Siberian work camp. POW Siberian work camp. So like just the shit that was in her DNA, the trauma that was literally in her DNA, is unfathomable.
Right.
And it really does recontextualize the like, my grandmother's a fucking pain in the ass and I don't like her. Like, yeah, no shit. Like she was dealing with just encoded trauma, the likes of which it's hard to even comprehend. Let alone just, like being a woman in the 30s. Like that's probably fucking hard enough. But like all of that shit on top of it, I cannot imagine how that affected her. And like there's lead in the gasoline. Like, everyone was fucking insane. Like, there's just like so many contributing factors.
There was lead in everything
to those generations.
Yeah.
And yeah, it did become kind of an exercise in empathy or in reevaluation of behavior and stuff like that. And this realization of like, God damn, like the things that they lived through.
Yep.
Of course, they were shitty grandparents. I mean, I know plenty of people who have lovely grandparents. So it didn't make everybody shitty.
Right.
But
exactly.
it's a lot. That's a lot to fucking process, especially in a world that like didn't believe in therapy.
Oh my God. Yeah. I'm going to do a hard pivot by reading part of the little quote that's on the cover of the book, where Eric LaRocca, among other things, says that this book is nasty as hell. And so like we talked about the deep kind of like stuff that inspired what the character goes through, I guess, or what the idea of survival means and all that. But holy shit, there is a lot of weird stuff to survive. And so I want to start by acknowledging that there is a content warning at the very beginning of the book. And maybe I have it. If I was a good podcaster, I'd have it pulled up already. We'll find out. Nope, I don't. But
vamp.
I know. I'm going to read the content warning really quick. Because then I'm just going to make you explain yourself, I guess. So there's a content warning at the very beginning of the story. Heads up, this story contains a lot of bug stuff, snake stuff, face trauma, religious trauma, anti-Semitism, claustrophobia, general existential angst, and a little suicidal ideation. It also might get some yacht rock stuck in your head, but no need to thank me for that. So that's the promise at the beginning of the story. We just talked a lot about like deep, meaningful, soulful things, and the promise at the beginning of the story is snakes and spiders and violence, rock. and yacht rock, which is its own form of violence. Although I did have a very pleasant evening one time. I had bought a couple of like nightstands at IKEA that were going to go next to on either side of my bed, and me and my girlfriend spent a night listening to a yacht rock playlist and assembling IKEA furniture, and it was a really nice evening.
Yeah.
So,
hell yeah,
that warning took me to that nice, pleasant experience. So let's talk about that. On the other side, on the not so deep thinking side, there is some shit, and I want to know where the idea for spiders and snakes come from.
I love spiders and snakes. It's just that simple. Actually, there's more interesting stuff than that. But first and foremost, I love spiders and snakes. I mean, I grew up in the desert. I grew up in Arizona, and
oh right, yeah.
My wife and I will talk about this every now and then. Even when we go, she's from like Eastern Pennsylvania. She's from like the Poconos. And we'll go up there, and that's spider country. There's spiders everywhere there, and I love spiders, but I pay them very respectful distance. And she, grew up with that, and she's like, don't like, they're fine, they're not going to hurt you. And I have to explain to her, like, no, I grew up in an environment where every spider had the ability to probably kill you. Like, it's just like a thing. Every snake you didn't fuck with, like,
yep.
You might see a garter snake, but that could be a fucking deadly venomous snake. So it's just like, you grew up in the desert and you have a certain respect for spiders and snakes because they could just end you. And so I love them. I love writing about them. There's bugs in most of my books, probably all of my books. And so, like, it's funny you mention Eric and Eric's very lovely cover blurb because, and I see at dark I become loathsome, right up there, which you want to talk about fucked up. God, I love that book, but it is fucked up. And I love Eric, and they're a very good friend. And I wanted to write something that was kind of extreme adjacent. I wanted to write something that was kind of that lineage and of that vibe because I love reading that stuff, but I generally don't go full tilt in that direction. And I came of age in the 80s and 90s and was reading plenty of splatterpunk and stuff like that at the
Sure.
time.
Yeah.
Obviously, I became more of like the Stephen King sort of side of the equation, that sort of acolyte. But I still enjoy Skip and Spencer and Barker and all just like the gross shit. So I wanted to write something that kind of acknowledged that side of my sort of literary heritage, as it were. And what better way to do that than with some torture and spiders and snakes and creepy crawlies and stuff like that. But also the impetus for this idea to begin with, bringing it back to the Poconos, was that anytime we would drive to where my wife grew up, or where we for a while had like a storage unit that we had like old shit of her family's in and stuff like that, we would make this drive a lot. And there was a gas station, first of all, in New Jersey that we would always stop at, because who doesn't love having their gas filled up for them? And it had a little bathroom that just always made me creeped out a little bit. But like that was the place where we would always have to stop on the drive to Eastern Pennsylvania. So like that was where this book took place, was in that bathroom in Phillipsburg, this gas station bathroom. But on that same drive, when we would get closer to the Poconos, when we were actually in Pennsylvania, near where there's like a family cabin of hers and where like the storage unit was and stuff like that, blanking on the name of the actual place, but there was this not just spiders and snakes house, but like just one of these like tiny little private zoos that was like, that also had like a snake house and an insect house and stuff like that. And then they have like, a really sad bear and like a tiger, right. And like just it's a little bit of a bummer. But I didn't know that at the time. Like I just knew that we always drove by this sign, and especially during the pandemic when we were making that drive a lot, I was like, God, I want to go. I want to see their insect house. I want to see their spider house and their snake house. But we couldn't stop because we weren't doing things like that at the time. So in Rest Stop, the gas station is right by basically that analog of the snake and spider house. And what better place for there to be a crazed killer to draw inspiration from? So that's the more practical answer as to why there's spiders and snakes and stuff like that, because of those two locations kind of melding into a more approximate setting for this story.
What I liked about the story, and I don't know like how vague to be, but like, so you had said that he gets kind of locked in this bathroom and at the beginning of the experience, and that's kind of where the spiders and snakes come into play. Like imagine being locked in a room with like these horrifying things. And I thought it was a nice way to like start the creepiness kind of at like start the baseline low and then like build and build. And so at first I was like, where's he going with this? But then like it all makes sense when you read the whole story. But like, again, yeah, it was nice to like baseline it kind of low, like freaky but manageable, and then like just kind of like build and build and build. But you opened the door so I can talk about it. You said crazy killer, which means it's not just spiders and snakes. And so the question I wrote down, which we may have already answered, but we'll see, is does the extremity of seemingly senseless violence affect the ability to have a message or moral to the story, is what I wrote down. Because when we find out that there is a crazed killer, all bets are off with what has happened or could possibly happen. Like it's a nightmare situation. And so in that point, I was like, is that noise drowning out like a bigger story or not? So I was wondering if you had a thought about that. Like, because of my reaction and the questions I had, obviously, you know how I felt about it, but like, Was that like a line you tried to walk, or did you feel like the story represented itself pretty well?
That's an interesting question. I mean, it's in a way, it's kind of in line with what you just described of the sort of ramp up
Yeah.
of obstacles,
Mm-hmm.
which it also wasn't an accident that by the time the snake gets involved, there's a sort of biblical feel to it. I mean, the main character's name is Abraham to
Right.
begin with. Like, I'm many things, but I'm not always subtle. And that's all very intentional. It was meant to evoke an almost biblical, natural sort of struggle
Mm-hmm.
between conscious man and these totems, the spider, the snake. And this is a tiny, tiny spoiler, so forgive me, but the method through which these creepy crawlies are delivered while he's trapped in the bathroom is through a ceiling vent. So they're literally coming from on high.
From above,
They're like being delivered to him from this presence that he can't see above him. Like it's all very much meant to feel like, Abraham's struggle with God. These stories like kill your son, circumcise yourself. Like these are fucking horrific sort of scenarios that this poor dude is given. And so it was meant to evoke that sort of dynamic from the get-go. And then you factor into like just the bare bones sort of logistics of it, of like if you get locked in a bathroom, chances are somebody has locked you in there. So there had to be another person at this gas station to do these things. And that's, I think, where it starts to really take on a truly sort of cosmic bent. Because who is this person? What does this person want? Is this person a person? Is this person an idea? Is this person a concept? That becomes the sort of thing that then Abe has to wrestle with and find either hope with, if it is a person, is it a person I can defeat? Is it a person I can fight? Is it a person I can reason with?
Yep.
Or utter defeat of like, if this person's stronger than me, if they have a weapon that I can't match, like, what do you do? Like, you can kill a spider. It's a lot harder to kill someone who's stronger than you and cannier than you. So yeah, it was part of that ramp up. Like first you got to fight the insect, the arachnid that is smaller than you, then the snake that is also smaller than you but way harder to fight, and then you got to fight an actual opponent, and then you got to fight the reason behind that opponent, then you got to fight the fucking concept behind having an opponent in the first place, and then you got to fight yourself on the other side of it. Like it's just this long protracted sort of battle, this arena. There are additional themes and images that you and I could talk about because you've read it, but that get very spoilery. So I don't want to rob anyone of that. No pun intended.
I'm robbing people all the time.
But like as you read the story, then I think what I'm saying will be made even clearer. The idea that there is there's a battle of self going on too. There's certain levels of reflection that are happening. I'm
so glad you said that the way you did, because you touched on several things that I absolutely would have spoiled if I tried to ham-handedly mention them. But the way that you introduced the concept is way better than I would have if I posed it as a question. So
it's a real balancing act here.
I know, and like we probably can't talk about much more as far as story goes. But I'm going to make a ridiculous analogy, and I'm going to apologize in advance.
I love it.
But when we were talking about survival and that kind of stuff earlier, a kind of a weird analog came to mind. Have you seen the movie Seven Psychopaths?
Is that the Martin McDonagh movie?
Yeah, with Colin Farrell and Sam Rockwell and
God, I don't remember if I've seen it.
Christopher Walken.
I feel like I've seen it.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right. Oh my God. I'm going to say no just because I don't remember a fucking thing about it.
And Woody Harrelson and everybody's in that movie. It's so good.
I forgot about that movie.
I'm going to recommend you watch it. And actually now I can't spoil it because the thing I want to talk about is something that happened at the end of it. But
turns out there's 8 psychopaths.
I know there's... You're not... Well... There's not, but like there's a twist with how many... Anyway. Maybe one of them is more than one of the psychopaths. There's a thing that happens in there that has to do with like when we come out on the other side of trauma that I think was so well represented, and it had to do with like Tom Waits is in it, and Tom Waits' character is anyway like fucking you gotta. It's such a entertaining movie, but like Colin Farrell's character is just this like alcoholic screenwriter, and he is very self-centered and just like there's not a lot to him. He's very like surface level. And then by the end of the movie, even people who are like hardened killers can see like something has changed about him, and like it changes how they interact with him. And so like there's a whole thing about coming out on the other side of a traumatic situation and how like we can't help but be changed by it. And our behaviors kind of reflect that. That was an analog I was going to draw, but I guess I don't want to spoil it too much. But I watched that movie.
Well, you reminded me of a movie that I completely forgot about, so I'll watch that.
I go back to that movie probably once or twice a year. I think it's it's like an entertaining thing. But anyway, so that's all I'll say about that. But it's because of the whole idea of like going through an insane experience and like what it does to the person when you're come out of it, I guess. But we'll move along from that.
Martin McDonagh, another horror playwright, very close to my heart.
And like I couldn't get it. Oh, what was the one that Banshees of Inisherin?
Oh yeah.
Do you want to talk about? That one was fucked up. Anyway, so just for the sake of the time we have, I'm going to navigate a little bit away from Rest Stop by inviting everybody. So it comes out October 15th. Pre-order through Shortwave directly. Support Alan. And I did just see him announce the whole idea of like, the annual, like a subscription kind of idea. Yeah. And I was thinking beforehand, I'm like, is there a way that I can just give him a stack of money at the beginning of the year, and then he'll just send me multiple things at once? So the concept was there, and it's a great idea. Yeah. So pre-order Rest Stop because it's fantastic. Rest Stop for me was the second thing of yours I read. So I read Nestlings before, and then I read Rest Stop, and I was like, this is different. This is a departure for Nat. And so that was going on in my head. And so I was like, oh, I've got these chapbooks, and I haven't had a chance to read them yet, but I'm about to talk to Nat. So let's do some reading this afternoon. And I read your two chapbooks. I read Generation, and then I read The Art of What You Want. And after reading The Art of What You Want, I was like, that's not a departure for Nat. That's just another way he can write, because there's some really messed up stuff that happens in that story. And so I guess all of this is to say, I appreciate that you can explore such serious and necessary topics about us as people, but at the same time, fuck me up, with the way that you write your story. And I think without having read Rest Stop or The Art of What You Want, maybe I wouldn't have understood the level to which you can go in the direction of extremes. So that's what I'm going to say.
Thank you. That feels at once exactly like what I want to hear, and also like a weird thing to say thank you for. But thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, I love doing both. Like that, you just kind of nailed what I look at as the sort of the remit, the assignment to like tell layered and legitimately kind of depth probing sort of stories and hopefully fleshed out realistic characters. But like, I love seeing how far I can take a thing. I love bad taste. I love
Yeah.
trying to marry what I look at as like the point of literature with bad taste. Like Cormac McCarthy is another one of my all-time favorite writers. And that motherfucker will like just have like a tree full of babies impaled on branches.
Yeah.
And then like the most exquisite prose and reflection on the beauty of a Western sunset. And it'll just like that to me is like great. I love it. I'm a Shakespeare kid. Like I fucking give me poetry and then give me someone murdering someone's kids and putting them in a pie to feed to them in revenge. Like I want both in my entertainment.
Well, that makes me think you must be a fan of Brian Evanson as well.
Oh my God. I love Brian Evanson.
Oh my God.
Talk about beauty and horror. God damn.
That guy will mess you up. And then he'll tell you happy birthday on Facebook.
I had never met him in person before and had never seen a picture of him.
Yeah.
And at StokerCon earlier this year, I was sitting in a group of people. You know, I was talking to like Paul Tremblay and John Langan and Sarah Langan, no relation, was over there. And I think Rachel Harrison was right across from me. And this guy was sitting literally next to me. And I just thought he was, you know, one of the other writers that I hadn't met yet. And he was like, hey, I'm Brian. And I was like, hey, it's nice to meet you. And we're all just kind of shooting the shit. And then someone at one point said like, yeah, shut up, Evanson. And I was like, wait, you're Brian Evanson? Oh my God. Like I was just sitting next to this fucking magician and had no idea. He's just very unassuming and super chill. I adore his work. He's fucking phenomenal.
Yep. Yeah. He, I tell these stories all the time and I feel bad, but like he made such an impression on me. I've interviewed him twice. Once was for when he novelized The Lords of Salem. And he gets on the call with us and he's like, sorry if my voice is a little bit rough. I had throat surgery yesterday or something like that.
Jesus.
And we're like, buddy, do you want to just do this another time? He's like, no, we're good. And so I was like, this guy is hardcore.
He'll just bleed.
And then, the second time I got to interview him was for, now I want to look and see, I think Collapse of Horses, I think was that collection. And he gets on the call and he's like, hey man, sorry if I sound tired. My son was born yesterday or something like that. And I'm like, buddy, let's just do this another time. But anyway, so like, again, dude's hardcore, but also incredibly generous, and his writing is fucking unparalleled.
One of my all-time favorite short stories, which I think is terrifying, and it is there's not a drop of blood in it. But I'm forgetting the title. It's got a bit of a Baroque title, but it's about the girl who, no matter which way she turns, you can't see her face, and it's just, it's like, I don't know, is it even like 1,000 words? It's so short, and it's just like it almost reminds me of like what Junji Ito can do, where like you know, like you read Uzumaki and you're just like the thought of a spiral is suddenly consuming your every fucking waking moment and absolutely terrifying. And it's just a little shape. The things he can do with simple concepts, or sometimes very garish concepts, he's great.
That's the mark of when you know a story. So I had thought of this earlier, and then we got on a tangent, but it came back. When a story you read changes the way that you perceive a thing, or a situation. Like this is not in a scary way, but one of the situations where I came across an old Facebook post where I said, I just accidentally let a fly into my apartment. And that's totally normal unless you read Zombie Bake Off by Stephen Graham Jones. And like, I love it when writer can just transform your concept of a thing because of how you read it when they wrote it.
Yeah.
Love that. That's one of my favorite things.
Ramsey Campbell is great at that too. Like he'll describe a thing and you'll just never not think of it that way again. And it's just like slightly askew. That's
fantastic. Yeah. Let's talk about the other book that is coming out. So When the Wolf Comes Home is coming out. This is going to be Nightfire again, right?
Yes.
And that's in April of next year, April 22nd. I wrote 4/22 and I was like, it's not 2022 next year. It's April 22nd.
It's so far away.
I know. So first off, I'm going to be all over you to get an Archivet. And then the second thing is, what can you say about the story, or what's your kind of general pitch for it right now?
I'm so excited for people to read it. I love this book so much. It is, if Mary was like my homage to unreliable narrators and serial killers and ghosts and giallo films and a little bit of J horror and just kind of like, just like weirdness, desert weirdness. And if Nestlings was like 70s paranoiac sort of pot boilers and horror sort of stories like Rosemary's Baby and Salem's Lot and stuff like that. When the Wolf Comes Home is my homage to like rails of coke snorting 80s action horror airport novel sort of vibe. It is a chase story. It is actually very inspired by Terminator 2, at least structurally.
Beautiful.
It's also inspired by The Twilight Zone and by Ursula Le Guin's The Lathe of Heaven and Firestarter and It and a few other things like that. So it is I think Mary and Nestlings are very different vibes from each other, and then this is a very different vibe from either of those two. But still, the kind of character-centric, larger themes at play sort of stuff that I like to write. So I think it's a very rich text, if I can say so myself. But it's also just like, sometimes the criticisms of Mary or Nestlings tend to usually just be like, it's slow. It's a slow burn. So this is the sort of book that's for like, oh, you don't want a slow burn? Okay. I'll give you a fucking pedal to the metal book. So yeah, it's I don't know. Have I ever said the plot out loud? I honestly can't remember, but it's about a struggling late 20s, early 30s actress in LA who's in a total rut and is miserable and is working at this like shitty under the highway diner in the middle of the city, and has a particularly harrowing night at work during the graveyard shift and kind of stumbles home in a haze and is like, I can't keep living like this. And while she's kind of figuring out her next steps, she discovers this little boy hiding in the bushes of her apartment building who's clearly on the run from something or someone. And she takes him into her apartment and tries to find out what's going on. And before she can really do anything, the boy's father shows up and is clearly a not nice guy and is demanding that she give him back. And she doesn't want to give him back because all her red flags are up. And the next thing she knows, a monster attacks and she finds herself on the run from this monstrous father who is kind of killing everyone in his path. And that's like the first 40 pages. It proceeds from there. I'm super excited about it. It's about dads. It's about my dad. It's about complicated dads and the relationship between fathers and children and the nature of fear and how fear changes when you're a little kid versus when you're an adult. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Oh man, I cannot wait. I'm very excited about that. Because I was thinking of a bad joke, but like I was like, if I wrote if I wrote a father story, it would be the monster moved to Alaska, and then that would be the end of it. So, um, end of the story. It's a short story.
Yeah.
But anyway,
The the idea of dad moving away is very much a part of this book. That's also in there.
Oh shit! You're gonna
Yeah.
make me. So the next time you're on is probably gonna be for that, and then we're gonna have more serious stuff to talk about. So
Hell
just
yeah.
continuing our theme of really fucking going there.
That'll be our 3-hour episode.
I was thinking recently about how one of the like freeing things of the podcast is it's like a free form. You don't have the constraints of time, so you can talk as much as you want to. But that's also sometimes I think a problem. And when I did that thing where I went to Josh Mallerman's house for the weekend, I was like, conceptually, I could record like 10 hours of stuff and then just cut it down to like the 2 best hours, like the 2 real worthwhile hours. And then it would seem like, man, we just had this fucking experience. You didn't know there was 10 hours of it. And it would be like a little bit more like, TV.
Yeah.
But turns out I don't have the ability to just spend weekends with every author I want to talk to. So that's what it is. I will say one final time that I encourage people to pick up Rest Stop, pre-order it if you're listening to this before it comes out. Also grab the are those chapbooks still available through Shortwave? The 2 chapbooks?
They are, yeah. I think they're like made to order, I think. Sorry,
Okay.
Alan, if I'm volunteering you for something. But there's also if you like to do Kindle stuff, there's a little ebook combo pack of the
cool.
2 of them for just a couple of bucks. And at the end of Rest Stop, there's like the first quarter of The Art of What You Want included as a little bonus to wet your whistle a little bit. But yeah, they're available as ebook always. And as far as I know, the chapbooks will keep flowing as long as people are buying them.
Well, yeah, so definitely pick those up. Because fantastic all around, and it did kind of give me a different layer of Nat's writing that I wasn't familiar with before. But before we say goodnight, I want to ask you what your feelings are about maybe it's an important date coming up, which is October 3rd.
October 3rd. What is October 3rd?
Isn't that when the new Salem's Lot?
Oh yeah. I knew there was something there, and I was like, "What is it? What is it?" I'm excited. I'm really excited. I fucking love Salem's Lot. It's one of my favorites. The Toby Hooper miniseries is also one of my favorite adaptations. We don't speak of the one from the early 2000s. Or was it the late 90s? I don't know. Fucking when Sue became a vampire, she suddenly had crimped hair. Like she had been crimping her hair as it's so like Hot Topic goth. I won't speak of that one, but I am excited for this. The trailer, I thought, looked great from what I could see. It's so fucking dark. I don't know why it's color graded so dark. I hope it's not like that for the actual movie, but it looks really promising. I'm excited. It got Gordon Lightfoot stuck in my head for weeks. Yeah, I've got a good feeling. Like I trust King. I know he's not always like the best arbiter of what constitutes like a good adaptation.
Mm-hmm.
But he's been very vocal about how this movie did not deserve the sort of promotional shaft that it has gotten. The scheduling shaft, just multiple shafts that this poor movie has gotten. And I buy it. I don't think he would be saying that just to like get people to stream a thing.
Right.
I think there's probably a really good movie there.
Yeah, he already made his money from it, right? So
yeah, exactly.
He has no reason to promote it.
Exactly.
Awesome. Yeah, I saw the trailer and I was like, this looks promising. So hopefully it ends up that way.
Yeah,
And
the
then
whole the thing of like Ben running into the street and it doing like the whip around, and when it comes back to him, there are figures standing on all the buildings and shit like that. It's like, the sun sets, like that line just slowly spreading. Great.
Yeah.
Hog heaven. The fucking vampire on the side of the treehouse for just like a second, like that little subtle little kiss of vampire. Mwah, love it. Just please make it brighter. I cannot see a thing.
And then one thing that just occurred to me that also is something that's coming out is that anthology that Brian Keene is editing of, is it stories that take place in the world of The Stand? Is that what it is?
Yeah.
How are you feeling about that? Are you looking forward to that one? Have you gotten any peeks?
I have seen the table of contents, so I know all the other contributors. It made me kind of emotional to see it. Like there is, as like a King superfan, I'm sure I'm predisposed to feel this way anyway. But it being an anthology about, this work that is so important to so many of us, and this iconic text that so many of us have kind of spent an immense amount of time with, because it is a bit of a commitment in all the best of ways. I have a feeling that King fans will feel similarly when the table of contents is announced, which I imagine will probably be in like a month or so, because there's just something really beautiful about how it's this like physical embodiment of multiple generations of horror in communication with itself. Like we're all talking about this book from the late 70s or the early 90s, depending on which version you read. But there are authors of like, Brian's generation, and then there are authors of Paul Tremblay and that class of writers, and then there's the kind of newer ones, of which like I kind of consider myself as well. So it's just like, it just really feels like almost like a yearbook in a way, a really interesting, and like I'm just so excited to read all the stories and see how these individual voices shine through. Because I think, it's such a great time for horror anyway, and I think it's going to be a really great showcase of what the genre can do now, what it likes about what it used to be what it used to do. And like, it almost feels weird for me to even talk about it because I'm so gobsmacked that I got to be a part of it, and like just so delighted and honored, and so I never announced that I was a part of it or anything like that. I still don't really talk about it, even though I've like signed a contract and received a check and stuff. Like I know I'm in it, objectively. But then fucking on Talking Scared, the most recent King interview that Neil did, he mentions my story. So it's like, I guess that technically it's okay for me to talk about it. Like that's about as big as a leak that you could get. Like he said it, so I guess that means I'm in it. So yeah, I'm so bowled over to be a very small part in this massive anthology. I just can't wait to see the cover, and I can't wait for more people to be able to talk about it. It's gonna be awesome. I think it's such a great idea. Like it is such an immense world to explore, the world of that book. And
congratulations on being able to participate in it, and to get paid to do so is just like a little extra bonus, I'd imagine. But now, I
would have done it for free, for sure.
As you were talking about it, I imagined it maybe as a bridge for people between I know and have read Stephen King, and here are all these contemporary authors who are just someone to discover. So that could be a really interesting outcome if that's the case too. So, that would be great.
I'm certainly excited.
Yeah, awesome. Well, Nat, I could talk another fucking 3 hours with you as always, but I really appreciate first of all, you taking the time and talking with me, but then more than anything else, the fact that you spent the time to write the stuff that brought us together. So thanks for Rest Stop. Thanks for the chapbooks. Thanks for everything that's coming in the future. I really appreciate all of it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for reading it. Thank you for chatting about it. Anytime. Next time we'll do another barn burner clockbuster conversation.
We're gonna get about dads.
We're gonna talk about dads. We're gonna hug it out. It's gonna be great.